do, Andrew, is this, man, let's dive in. Let's just dive in. I mean, essentially the idea is I'm just wanting to talk to people that I think I've enjoyed conversations with, that their perspective of life and work and family and personal growth and what is meaningful. And ultimately, that's kind of the idea of Rich Life, is what is meaningful and what does success mean to you? And anytime we bring up the word success, it's interesting how today words that we use have a lot of different meanings and attachments to them. I'll say success. Some people think, oh, you're talking about climbing a ladder, or you're talking about financial, or you're talking about having lots of things or whatever. And that's not the idea. The idea is, like Andrew, like, what is it meant for you? You know, and I can share, hey, here's what I've been processing. And it's processing it with people that are thinking about it differently. They're not just receiving it from society. Oh, the world says this, therefore that's just what we're going to play the world's games. So just the idea of exploring these kind of deeper conversations of what is true meaning, what is a truly successful life. And there's different ideas about it, because we're all different people and we have our own experiences and things that we get to share. And so I think you're going to add a lot to that. I've enjoyed learning from you and sharing with you over the years. So with that as a big picture setup, I wanted to really start though with your vocational path. I say vocational, it's like your calling, you know, your life's work, if you will, the job that you have, the path that you've had professionally. And, you know, as you think about kind of what you're doing now, what I've found is I'm going to start this way, with a lot of decades, typically with work, what I've seen, I think you've got a couple of decades maybe under you, right?
Barely, yeah.
So you've probably had a revision and a learning of who you are professionally and who you are as a filmmaker with the work that you're doing, the stories that you tell. How has that shifted, and kind of where are you now? And are you starting to see a common theme, and like deep within you, it may be expressed in different contexts and different stories and different, you know, aspects, but maybe there's something down there like, this is what I'm wanting to get out. This is maybe the common thread to a lot of the work that I'm doing as a filmmaker, storyteller.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. I think that I started carrying a camera around and shooting stuff in the backyard when I was in middle school, and I really did kind of find and fall in love with this thing very, very young. And it's the kind of work that took me at least a while to really learn how to do it. So I would say in a lot of ways, it really feels like, you know, I spent 15 years or so just like learning how to do what I'm doing, you know, like really,
Yeah.
It's maybe there are some people that come out fully formed and they're like savant level talent. It took me a real time to learn not only like the craft of like how to tell a story, but then also I think, to your point, to start to sense like, what are the stories that I'm really drawn to? What's the work that's really fulfilling to me? How do I build a team of people that really make things in a collaborative, meaningful way? And I don't know. In a lot of ways, I feel like really only in the last couple of years, and this is after, you know, many films, many projects, like I really am starting to feel like I'm kind of coming into a place where my voice and my interests and my passion, like it's kind of like aligning a lot more. And I just say that to say like, it wasn't like a snap instant thing. I think a lot of times when I say to people, like I found and fell in love with this thing that I devoted my life to when I was 12 or 13, that they kind of assume that that just means I was like off to the races. And I think it's just been a really long, beautiful, challenging, joy-filled process of going from the point of like, I love this thing. I think this thing could really do some good in my life. It could do some good in the world, learning how to do it. And then now kind of learning like where to point that, where to aim that focus. And I should caveat, I mean, to your point about decades of work, I should caveat, like I am still young, and I do feel like I'm very much still learning. So it's kind of you to say what you say. I feel like I've learned a lot from you, and I still feel like I'm really at the early stages, you know, kind of looking forward at the whole thing.
There's so much packed in what you just said. Like there's a lot of little nuggets. One is the 15 years, right? Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers talks about when he studied a lot of successful people, it was 10,000 hours or 10 years of doing the work. in terms of when they started really gaining traction as a professional in doing the thing. And here you are 15 plus or, years in. So that's an interesting one. So somebody's out there 20, 22, 25, and they're struggling. Tell us about the early years of what that looked like in doing the work, pointing in a direction, but it was what you said, 15 years of learning. I don't know that this day and age, I think we're losing sight of it. Takes time to do the thing, to learn the thing, to learn the nuance, to learn other roles, it just takes time. So I don't know, speak to that, the early years of what that looked like for you.
Well, it is, and it's like, I'm kind of in awe of it. Like, one of the things I love about filmmaking is it's kind of one of those lifelong, like, you could devote your life to this thing and you still wouldn't be able to wring out all the potential, or you still would, some of the best movies this year have been made by filmmakers in their 80s, and it's really striking. Like, it really speaks to a lifelong pursuit, not just of like a certain set of curiosities, but then also of learning the skill set that can express those in ways that move other people. So I think in a lot of ways, starting out, you just have to be really comfortable being really bad at something. Like, I had a moment not too long ago where someone showed me like a short film that I made in high school. And it was really striking, like it wasn't great. We started making skateboard films and music videos and short films. And, but what I think was a really powerful moment for me was someone said one time that making movies is really hard because it's really hard to learn how to make movies without making movies. And that's a real
Say that again.
in it. Well, just that the experience of making a film is very unique in its challenges, and it's very hard to learn how to do that without doing that. And I think really early on, I had the really good fortune of being young enough and maybe naive enough that I just kind of went for it, and a couple different instances of, the first couple feature length projects that I made, I made with some very dear friends and very supportive people. And I don't think we knew what we didn't know. And we just did it. And I think like what I'm most proud of is over those early years, there were a lot of people, when I came out of film school, there were a lot of people who were sort of like precious about developing the master work. And I would see them sit in like development for 10 years. And meanwhile, we went and made like 15 films. Like, there was just this sense in me of like, I knew I had to learn how to do it. I knew I had to get those reps that you mentioned. And the only way to do that was going to be to just like bite the bullet, use what we had. A lot of times it was really cheap. A lot of times it was really, stories that were very close to us, things we had access to. It's like just eliminating the barriers and the obstacles so we were never caught waiting in that imaginary line. And that sense, I think, especially in this town, of like, I'm waiting for my break. I'm waiting for someone else to come choose me. I'm waiting to be selected. I'm waiting for, it speaks to a lot of fear. And it also speaks to like, you can actually get very comfortable. Like, I've gone to cocktail parties where everyone has a reason or a person that their film isn't getting made. It's like, and that's really like, it's a way to offset the initiative versus like, if you can just kick some doors down and say, no one's inviting me. No one's asking me. No one's no one needs more filmmakers in the world. Like, let's be clear. This thing brings me a lot of joy. I think I have the potential to be good at it. I think I'm cultivating a team of people who really have the potential to be good at it together. And we're just going to make stuff, and we're just going to keep making stuff. And we're not going to like die on the hill of perfection. We're just going to be incrementally getting better. And what I love is over the years, everything that we've worked on, we've gotten better. And I could point to certain films, like, 2-year-long projects. And I could tell you like what I learned specifically, technically, like I needed to make that to learn this. And then look, I did this next one and I learned these 2 more things. And then I put those things together and I could do this. And I learned, and that process of growth and curiosity and the pursuit of like a lifelong craft is, I don't know, it's just intoxicating. I love it.
All right. So I got so many nuggets out of what you said. Okay. So I'm gonna throw some of these at you. So just kind of let me go through some of these off of what you just said. When you started out, you start out as a beginner, as a learner, and you're often really, really bad at what you're doing. Right? Like, think about, and I love the analogy of a child learning to walk. They're terrible. right? They can't walk. They can't put 3 or 4 steps together. And I think what happens is sometimes the fear of stumbling, the fear of not being able to walk the first or second or third time prevents people from walking careers or pathways or new things or a sport or an activity or whatever in life. So I love the analogy of the child walking, because it's like, no, you're going to be bad early on. So yeah, of course. But what could you be in 5 years if you're intentional, incrementally improving, doing something, looking at what it is, seeing how you did, looking at how you get better, getting feedback, growing. And so it's like almost what I heard is kind of a confidence in the lifelong pursuit, but also confidence in growth over time, that when I'm 10 years in or 20 years in, I'm not going to be the same as I was in the first year or two. The idea of craft, I think, is one of the most powerful words that I have grabbed a hold of in the last year as it relates to work. I think it's better than career. I think craft. So in our context, we're helping people with their financial lives, and there's different roles. Like we have advisors, we have planners. What's the craft of creating an amazing meeting for someone, or creating an email that pops and that's clear in a world where financial information can be confusing, like, or pulling a plan together, or creating a client experience that's smooth, and and all these things, or training in a way. Like there's all these different angles, I think, within all of our work. But the idea of craft. And so it's not like, okay, well, how do I get the next promotion? It's how do I get better? Like, how do I get better at the thing that I'm doing this week, today, next meeting, all right, next film, next story that you're telling, next commercial, whatever you're doing. So I love that. The last 2 years, when you said that, it resonated with something in me. I won't tell you how old I am, but I've been at Ron Blue for almost 25 years next year, and been in the industry since 95. And a lifelong learner, as you are. And the things that I've learned in the last 2 to 3 years, I'm like, how did I not know these things 10 to 20 years ago? It's unbelievable, right? Like, these are powerful concepts. They become more crystal clear. And I think the more you get at it, it's almost another good analogy I love is the idea of a flywheel. And at the first turn of that merry-go-round or that flywheel is super hard, right? It's all effort. It's no momentum. The next one has 1% momentum, 99% effort, then 2% momentum, 98%. So you keep turning it, you keep turning the thing, and it starts creating its own energy and its own momentum. And then it becomes much like a driver. A new driver sees all kinds of things and doesn't know what to pay attention to, what's important, what's not. As a filmmaker now, you're able to kind of go, these are the 3 or 4 things that are going to be really critical for what the success we're going to have, right? And so you're able to ignore all the things that don't matter or don't matter as much and focus on the things that matter ultimately. You said being comfortable being bad at something. That's huge. So that goes back to the child walking, being comfortable being bad at something, naive enough to go for it. And I love that, because what it tells me is that you weren't afraid to fail, and you didn't even probably know what failing meant. You were just going in a direction with commitment to it. The idea of getting reps, so the success for anything is getting reps. I mean, no matter what it is, tennis, a sport, filmmaking, in our context, meetings, having meetings, talking to clients, learning how to put together things in a way that they understand, and getting reps. You got to get reps. The initiative is a big one. The initiative is something that I'm seeing as a difference maker in terms of people doing their work, the willingness, the passive versus initiative. And that's something we'll talk a little bit more, because I think it's so powerful, is expecting things to happen for me versus looking for my opportunities to step into and taking action into them. So that's kind of my download from what you just said. I'll let you reflect on anything that kind
you
of
made it sound
from that.
You made it sound great. Yeah, I like it better from you. No, what the thing that you said about craft, what's interesting that what I was thinking about as you were saying that was that one of the things that I knew I had really early on was I didn't have all these traditional, I didn't have this student film that won awards. I didn't have this like most likely to succeed. So, I didn't have any of these things. What I knew I had really, really early on, even more than like being okay failing, is I had this keen awareness that I loved the actual craft. Like I knew that there was an enormous amount of joy for me, but not just joy in like the recognition or status or the rewards externally, I would be at 2
Mm,
a.m. in an edit room with two people for the 20th night in a row, and I'd be like, I really love this. Like, I love this in a way that I actually feel kind of invincible because no one can take this away. And like, time's on my side when it comes to learning, to
mhm,
your point on the reps. Like, I can get all that. I can build a team. This thing can grow. But like, I think that's so powerful when you at your most honest place, divorced from all the external societal rewards, figure out there is real joy and meaning associated with the more difficult parts of it, like the challenging parts of it, the
mm,
really gritty, like hard parts of
mm,
make part of why I love filmmaking is it's this mix of like exuberant joy and collaboration, and also that it's hard. It's really hard. And actually that part of it being hard kind of makes it more powerful. It makes the whole thing more rewarding because there's like it's not a walk in the park, Like anytime I walk out of a movie, I just want to hug the filmmaker and be like, you did it. You did it. I know it's so hard. Everyone's so hard. But that sense of, I love this for all the internal craft-based reasons. I love this for all the reasons that maybe other people wouldn't love it. I love this not in spite of those challenges, but because of those challenges. And that, man, like, whatever you're doing in your life, like whatever field you're in or whatever, like that is such a powerful thing. And it's kind of been like the signposts that I've followed in my life. Like I've really, when I am drawn and I am alive and I find joy and I find meaning in areas that other people would find really difficult or they'd want to skip over, or they would like, that's been my sign to be like, okay, let's lock in there. And it's made a lot of the other stuff a lot more simple because you can pass on my film. You can not buy this one. You can like, but I know I'm going to make another one. Like I know I'm not stopping. I know that like, we've built this team that's going to keep going. So anyway, I thought about that when you said the word craft. It shifts you, and you're the king of this. Like, it shifts you out of a short-term transactional view of work, of what can I get out of this project now? Like, what withdrawal can I make now from this project? Every project, everything, how much can I pull out? Versus like, you start to change the metrics. You start to be like, what am I learning on this? Like, part of the metric for us as a team on every film has become part of how we select our projects, and part of how we evaluate our projects is certainly there's a financial, that's what allows us to keep going. But there's like, what's the learning curve on this one? Like, we're embarking on one right now where there's not a financial incentive, and it's structured in a very different way. But the learning curve takes us right into the heart of an area that we think we really need to grow in. And that's just
mm,
cool because you start to
mm.
think about your life and your path as like a much longer term endeavor, which again, I know is like, stuff I've learned from you.
But that's that comfortable with being. It's even beyond comfortable being uncomfortable. It's seeking out the discomfort that's beyond your comfort because you understand that's where the growth is, and and you're evaluating. Hey, how do I need to grow? Well, if I'm going to grow, thereby it's already going to be out of my comfort zone. So then, what are the areas that we need to grow out of our comfort zone? Meaning, we can't do the thing yet. We haven't done it yet at this level. I remember maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago, might have been, there was a client situation, and I served he and his wife, and it was at a level I had never done before. And honestly, I didn't charge enough, but it wasn't about that. I was like, they're paying me to help learn how to serve people like them. And it was hard, and it was challenging, and it was awesome. And there's something about finding that level of, I'm willing to do the hard. I'm expecting it to be given to me. And then therefore, what's the hard that I need to be prepared to do?
Yeah, well, and some of it for us and what we do here is like, when you do something and it's successful, people will offer you 3 or 4 versions of doing that same thing again. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's those really difficult moments of like, no, I gotta go do something else that scares me, like that one did. That one scared me a year ago. But if I kept
Yeah.
doing that one, that just becomes very like, I don't know. That's the opposite of like you're saying, like kind of leaning into the stuff that's like outside of what you think you can do. Those are the people that are on a path towards something great, and not the ones that have just set up shop at the first checkpoint.
Yeah. how would you go back kind of outside of that kind of a hard, but like a real hard, like the conditions were hard. Maybe it was a quote unquote failure, which is an interesting idea of how you approach things that feel like failure. The child falling down, was that a failure, right? What are some of the hardest moments that you've had because the conditions were just brutal and it just, I don't know, for whatever reasons that were involved in it, was just super hard.
They're so different, you know, like some of them have been very difficult, like emotionally. Like I lost my dad years ago in a tragic bike accident. And years later, I ended up making a film about loss and grief. And for me, that
Mm,
was really hard. And part of why I made it was because I could tell there was just a lot there was a lot about that situation that was really, really difficult for me. And I knew in my own peculiar way, like I had to go right into the heart of it. Like I had to go spend time with other people who had experienced this. And I had to like pull up a seat and sit down and not like rush by it. So like emotionally, that was really challenging. We made a film about human rights and environmental abuses in the clothing industry all over the world. And that one was hard, just like physically. You know, we shot in 20 countries and we had two backpacks and we're sneaking into factories and we were physically, you know, we got sick. There was, you know, threats of violence. There was, you know, subsequently threats of lawsuits. We were making something very challenging in that situation, and we were going up against a multi-trillion-dollar industry, trying to hold up a mirror and call for change. So that one was just like that was just the excruciating fear of like, are we crazy? Are we too far in? Where's the line? What's safe and unsafe? You know, I'm in these countries with people that I'm responsible for, you know, and we're doing
mm,
things that are towing the line. And it's not hypothetical in those situations. It's very, very real. Other times, you know, it's been really challenging because you have a project that you really, you know, it's a dream and you believe in it and you're not able to see it through. And that's excruciating. That's like having, well, I won't even put it in a comparison. It's just very painful. And it can really rock your confidence. It can rock your sense of momentum. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times it's a lot of like it's always really, really challenging. It's just always challenging in very different ways. And it's funny because you sort of go through these very, very difficult experiences and you come out on the other side thinking, wow, like I'm so much stronger. Like I grew so much. And
mm,
then the next one is challenging in totally different ways. Like you were prepared for, you know, people with guns
mm,
in your
yeah.
face and these things, but you weren't prepared for. So I think that level of challenges is really hard. And again, I don't want to like sugarcoat it. Like I think a lot of times, you know, you can look at finished projects and you can just see the successes. And I just can't say this enough. Like there's just been so much failure. And I say that proudly because I'm not someone who like, the people don't like saying that word. Like I love saying that word. Like we experienced a lot of failure. We've experienced success, but we've experienced a lot of failure. And those failures have taught me so much. And to your point, like how I have had to process and like label what they were and divorce them from, you know, what your mind can tell you they are, and just think like very like sometimes it was tactical, sometimes it was financial, sometimes it was you know, it's a very specific thing and very cliche, but man, those have taught me so much more than the successes. Like they have taught me
Yeah.
so much, and they have also added to, if you can get comfortable with the fact that there's going to be success, there's going to be failure. If you're in any kind of creative pursuit, which I would argue all of our pursuits are fundamentally creative, you're not trying if you don't have both. Like if you don't have both, you're not really in the game. So if you can come to the table saying this is just table stakes, like this is part of this game, is there's going to be success, there's going to be failure, and you can get comfortable with both. It goes back to that thing I was saying of like, it kind of makes you invincible. It kind of makes you unstoppable. It kind of makes you like, once you've really felt lows, once you've really been like, there is no money, there is no
Yeah.
light, there is only dark. Then you're like, it happens again, and you're like, oh, we've been here, like we've
Yeah.
seen this before, we've felt this before. Didn't kill us. It's not going to kill us
Yeah,
this time.
and it's that thing of, I've been thinking a lot about some of our biggest barriers are not the physical or other outside of us. A lot of our biggest barriers are internal, and a lot of that's a mindset shift. So if it's a person, I think it's human nature, but I think there's learning some of these things that can be super helpful. If you're not aware that you don't want to go into discomfort, if you're not aware that you see failure as this thing that you never want to experience, and if I think if we go down deep, it taps into some insecurity that I'm not perfect. It taps into some insecurity within, and it's like if you can kind of put the ego to the side and put on a learner, growth mentality, abundant mentality perspective, then it's a shift. It's a subtle. What we're talking about is so fundamental, but if you don't have it, there are all these blocks that are in the way of you learning and growing and doing and making progress in your thing.
No, it's true. I mean, it's like everybody says it, but like the fear of it is worse than the experience of it. So once you experience it, you're like, I'm okay. It's like having tragic loss in your life. It's like it's a lot of things. Like the fear of it is the crippling part. Once it happens, you're like, well, the people close to me still love me, and I'm still gonna eat today. I'm still gonna I'm okay. Like I don't know. It takes some of the power of a lot of it is imaginary, but to think that holds a lot of us back, myself included at times, that a somewhat imaginary perception of what a feeling will feel like holds us back from doing something great. That's kind of wild. That's kind of wild to think about.
And the problem with mental barriers, if it's a physical wall in front of you, if you're driving down the road and there's a branch blocking the road, you could be like, okay, well, I've got options. Is there a way to go around it? And is there a way that I can call the county and come and cut it? Do I need to take a different road? You start to think about options. If it's an internal barrier in your mind that you don't even know exists, that's so much more difficult to deal with.
It's so much more difficult. And like one of the best things that I've learned is to be able to talk about it very specifically. Like a couple of people that work very closely with me, like when something feels scary or it's usually because it's like convoluted and tied together, and we try to just like piece it apart and be like, what are we actually concerned about? And sometimes it's very real concerns, by the way. Sometimes it's like an actual, like, we are concerned about the safety and well-being of our crew in this situation. But you have to like take it piece by piece, because when it gets all like braided up together as just this not good feeling that you avoid, then it's really powerful as soon as you can talk about it. And sometimes, honestly, Greg, it's as simple as like, I'm afraid that I'll look foolish. I'm afraid that like I won't be able to do what I'm trying to do. And that's so powerful to say, because as soon as you say it, you're like, well, that's kind of silly. Like, who am I even talking about? Like, no, it's great. It's great.
I'm afraid of what other people might say about me or what they may think about me if this doesn't work. Right.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And I love what you're saying, because that's true. I mean, I think, and this kind of transitions a little bit into some of the mental health items, but I think we can get into a space where there's anxiety, our head is cloudy, we're unclear, and that's where we're concerned about things that could happen in the future. We're holding on to things that have happened in the past. There's something in front of us that we're not exactly sure how to deal with. But your point is so big that sometimes I've felt anxiety, and I'm like, hold on, what am I feeling anxiety about? And I'll go, well, there's this thing going on at work. There's this thing going on with family. There's this other thing that I'm concerned about, whatever. Somebody treated me a certain way. There's a relationship that I want, didn't go the right way, conversation. Okay. And sometimes what I'll find is there's 3 or 4 things, and so when I unpack that feeling, then I'm like, oh, these are the things. Now, what can I do about them? And I love the idea that worry's only value is to help you do something that you need to do. And so if you're already committed to doing the things that need to be done, that worry has no value, right? And obviously there's a lot of health effects. There's a lot of detrimental. My family has a history of heart disease and heart attacks, and a major contributor is stress. So how we deal with stress, how we process these things, and a lot of times they'll hit us at night. They'll hit us, when we're going to bed, and all the thoughts are flooding in our mind, and then it disrupts our sleep, which is, compounds the issue. So I love what you're saying on that, because it's like, can you name? Maybe you can't name it all, but those are 5 factors, 4 factors. Can you name 3 of them or 4 of them or whatever? And then kind of go, okay. And as you're processing that, maybe writing it down, maybe thinking about what you need to do tomorrow. Writing it down can be big because otherwise you just keep turning and turning and turning and turning on the thing. Whereas writing it down can be like, okay, I've got a place for this. I'm going to pay attention to it at the proper time, in the proper way. Tomorrow, next week, when I see the thing, when I do, whatever. I don't know if there's anything that you reflect on with that.
Yeah, no, well, and I think it's just powerful I mean, what you're saying is strong, like to name things and say things out loud with other people. Like I definitely can internalize a lot. I feel responsible for a lot of what we're doing here. And there's a place I can go kind of like inside. And I think what I'm trying to get better at is more and more like bringing other people into that process, and usually it doesn't scare them nearly as much as I think it's going to scare them, when I actually sit down and say like, hey, I'm really concerned about like how we get from here to here. And I'm worried about like what takes place in the middle, and they become a part of it, like it allows them not only to get closer to me, but like it allows a lot of these things that we sort of like hyper individualize, especially in this country. A lot of other societies and cultures throughout history have tackled these things together. Like they've seen these as collective things, like mental health, like of my community was something I was invested in for all of us, not just like, you know what I mean? Like there's this interesting shift. Like the more I travel, the more I realize that we have really just been swimming in this fishbowl of all of my success and all of my shortcomings must all be me. And it's a powerful thing in terms of like community building or team building to just begin to kind of say, it's just so funny. Every time I open up and say something like that, people around me are like, yeah, yes, like we've been wanting that. Like we've been wanting to be invited more in to be a part of the process, not just see the final results, And the only other thing I thought about when you were saying that too, Greg, is just like the importance of like I certainly think about mental health a lot. It's challenging for me. There's challenging history of it in my family. And I definitely am I can be very obsessive. And so, when I'm really in a project and in something, it's like I'm really in it. And then there can be real lows. Like frankly, when we deliver a film, like the moment that's sometimes supposed to be the most celebratory, I can feel kind of blue just because I'm like, I miss it already. I loved the making it part. But one of the things
it's like
that
you're
we're
going
doing,
home
like,
from vacation.
it
It's
kind
like when
of
you go
is.
home from vacation, Christmas is over, you're taking down the decorations.
Yeah. No, totally. But I think some of it for me is just realizing that like a lot of feelings that I have gotten a lot less scary when I've started to be able to accept more and more that they just don't last forever. I mean, that sounds so basic, like that's something you tell a toddler, but like, even like a couple nights from now, we're going through a huge party here as a team because we're finishing a project. And part of why we go so hard on celebrating is like, I know that we'll need that down the road. I know that like it'll be darker up ahead. We'll be back in the middle of something. And we've got to be able to kind of have that perspective of like, we've been here before. We know this. Like we know this cycle and we're going to savor it when it's sweet and we're going to surround each other when it's hard. And that idea of doing it more together than alone though I'm still like in the infancy of learning that, but I know that's where a lot of the life is.
So much in there. So a few things that I captured there. I saw a quote recently that's like the devil works in isolation. So the idea of us processing things only on ourselves, I think we're meant to be in community. In the counsel of many, there's wisdom. It's kind of like who are you being fully transparent with in your life? Like, is there a person or a couple of people, whatever, a group that you're able to be fully transparent? I think that's a super healthy, like if you kind of said, hey, tools in the toolbox, how I'm going to go through life. Who's that person that like, I can be, this is all of me, the ugly, the good, the everything. Can't believe I had that thought. Can't believe I did that thing. Like who are those people? I can't believe I'm wrestling with this thing. Can't believe I'm having this emotion. Like we need to have those people. It also makes me think about mentors that have been through things, especially, I mean, in every area of life, but we're talking professionally, talking personally, relationships, what have you, spiritually. It's like, who's been in front of us that we can learn from? Because it's powerful to have, oh, they went through that too. They got through it. Because I think that speaks to one of the lies is that you are the only one that has this thing. You're the only one that thinks these thoughts. You're the only one that has a struggle. And we are all unique and we all have our own fingerprint, but while there are differences, everybody has their heart. I used to think everybody had it all figured out, and I was shocked when somebody didn't have it figured out. Yeah. And with life, I'm like, nobody has it figured out. And then there's some people in my life, I'm like, well, maybe they do. So I'm shocked. If like after decades of knowing somebody, they're like, okay, all right, I've known them for a while. They seem to be, and not that they necessarily do, but they're doing pretty well, at least on what I can see. But it's like, I think it helps you resonate that we're on a journey, that we're all, nobody's perfect. We won't be perfect. And we need people in community, the power of community, the power of not being in isolation. I had a friend that said, any issue you go through, somebody's written a book on that. You know what I mean? I mean, it's also any issue you go through, somebody's, got something to say about what you're doing, or somebody's lived an aspect of it, if not most of it. When family issues growing up, some issues with when my parents got divorced and some other things. And I remember thinking, no matter what I go through, somebody has gone through much, much worse, number one, and they've handled it much, much better, right? And that may sound like a self-critical thought, but it wasn't. For me, it was like encouragement that somebody's gone through this and they've done much better, man. Come on. Like, yes, it's hard. We do hard things, and life is hard. And that's not to trivialize it. That's not to minimize it. Like, go get the help. Make sure you got the people in your life. Make sure you got the community. Make sure you're processing. Make sure, you're going through these things as you are able to, stumbling along the way. But it was an encouragement to me to kind of go, no, like, people have been martyred. People have been in prisons around the world. People, Helen Keller, right? Like, I mean, you kind of go through examples. There's lots of examples of history that are encouragement to me of people that went through super hard things, and man, what they were able to do on the other side, and go, okay, it doesn't make what I have not hard. It all hard is hard, even though it's different. But man, people have been through this, and they've done well with it. And then the last thing is celebration, the power of celebration. I think one of my strength finders is futuristic. Like, where are we going? Like, where's this thing headed? Like, what can it be, right? And what I can do is when something gets done that's actually pretty cool, I can go, well, yeah, I mean, of course, but like, where are we going now? And the power of celebrating what has happened. And I think especially in a family, in relationships, in a work professional environment, like, man, let's celebrate the wins, and then let's get on to the next thing. But let's take a moment and celebrate. Practically was writing down everything that's happened in 2023, or some of the big things, not everything, but what are some of the big things that have happened this year as we get towards the end of the year? And it was like, wow, it's good to remember, right? Like, it's good to remember what has happened. So the idea of celebration, I love that. I think that's super important for cultures of all kinds.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And it was hard for me. It's funny you said that, because it was hard for me too, because I think every project, as much as you love it, makes you feel a little bit like we're going to get it next time. Like, we learned so much, and now like the next one, like, and there's something beautiful. I love that, actually. But we have a hallway back in our office here that we just this year put up, all the posters from all of our films. And it's funny because for a long time, I didn't want to see those all the time. I just didn't want them all. I was so like, the next one. And it's just been recently that I've been like, no, these are really important. And like, in all their beauty and imperfection, they reflect where we were at that moment. And it's great to celebrate them. And also, to your point on the history thing, it's so true. And the other thing about the other people have felt this before is like, that's the power of all art. I mean, that's maybe the primary reason we have art in the world. Is art is here to say that feeling that you can't even name. Not only has someone else felt it, but they've found a way to express it, and it touches you like at a soul level. I mean, that's like the sacredness of art, is like, I can be in a movie theater and I can experience something. I could be in an art gallery at a concert, and I could not know that person on stage, but something about what they wrote on that cello, it's like it's healing something in me, because I'm feeling that sense of I'm not alone. So that's such a powerful, beautiful thing.
I was looking for the book because one of my clients, they just passed over, I must not have it here. They passed over 50 years of marriage, just had their 50th wedding anniversary. And they've got 6 children that are married, and 27 grandchildren. And they wrote stories about how each of them in their faith came to know Jesus. And then they wrote about how they came to find each other and their story and the story of their family. And then the second half was 50 lessons learned in 50 years of marriage. And they were capturing their story and their God stories for future generations so that they knew their story. And so I think some of it is like the power of remembering the story, the power of remembering and capturing what's happened. Because then when it gets hard, you go, yeah, but we've done some neat things. And I think of the human mind, we can forget so easily, right? Like what has happened. Yeah. And I see that in the Old Testament a lot, like people forgetting what God has done, right? That's a lot of the Old Testament, forgetting what God has done, and now they're moving on, to other things. And the power of celebrating. As you've kind of gone through your work, you mentioned something about waves come in sets. Things come in waves. Can you share a little bit about what do you mean about this, Andrew?
Yeah, well, when I was learning how to surf, which I still am, I'm like, I love surfing so much, and I'm like the worst surfer, and I'm not exaggerating on either end of that spectrum. But I surf with some guys that are really good, and one of them in particular, I remember when we were first paddling out into some bigger waves. He said, we were paddling out, and he said, just remember this morning, waves come in sets. And I was like, I have no idea what you mean. This must be like a surfer language that I don't know yet. And then I was out there, and, waves really do come in sets. They come very close together, especially when they're larger. And when you're in a certain place with a board, you can really feel like you're in danger of drowning. Like you can feel like you are facing the end. And then all of a sudden the water's calm. And there is, you realize in that moment, like, that was a moment I was in, and I have really started to think about that in so many parts of my life. Like when we are in something really intense, again, it goes back to the thing of like, things are not forever, and they become so much less scary when they're not forever. And embracing the fact that like my life is not a picture of like perfect balance or symmetry. I don't work perfect, like, briefcase hours like my dad did. There's a lot of unconventionality to how I do what I do, but it's because I've come to embrace, like, when we're in the midst of something, I'm really in it. Like they're really intense chapters. Like there was 6 months of this year that were just among the most intense I've ever had. And then like, we're about to deliver this big project, and then I'm going to take weeks off, like weeks and weeks. I'm going to be completely unplugged. And I think learning to embrace that sense of like, not trying to get like, can we make the waves just 2 feet and always on? So it's just like, no, they're going to come. It's going to be overwhelming. It's going to feel scary. It's going to feel like it's pushing us to the limit. But in that moment, knowing like, but then there's calm water. Then there's calm water. And there maybe even is so much calm water, we're begging for waves to come back. But that sense of like yielding some sense of control and just embracing the fact that life, especially with kids growing up and all the things that are happening, it's never going to be this perfectly manageable, serene, that it's okay for a wave to knock us over. It's okay for something to come out of nowhere. It's okay to have a few in a row where you're like, whoa, like I can't, that sense of like, it's not forever. There's calm water on the other side. Yeah, it stayed with me, and I'll be in really difficult moments, I'll be in really difficult moments, and I'll just say that to myself. Waves come in sets. Like we're in a set of waves. We're in a set of waves right now. And it's not going to be like this forever.
So an analogy that I've used before is that I think our minds want cruise control. We want to hit, we're on the road, we just want to hit the cruise control. Well, my experience has been when you hit the cruise control, it lasts for a little bit, and then somebody gets over, and then the speed changes, and then the traffic hits. And you know what I mean? It's like, you might have it in snippets, but the power then is, if you're looking for cruise control, if you're wanting it to be easy, if you're wanting it to be smooth, which is all very natural. Those are all very natural, I think, to all of us. But once you learn life doesn't work quite like that, let's accept it. There's a quote by, I think it's Billie Jean King, but it's champions adjust. And, in sports, in competition, business, relationships, things come in that you didn't expect or that you didn't know, or it didn't happen exactly the way that you wanted it to. Champions adjust, problem solve. There's a power to seeing ourselves as problem solvers, right? We'll apply with people in Atlanta, and they talk about the community of problem solvers. Like, what are the problems? So it's like, yeah, let's just figure out what the problems are, and let's kind of look at life as we're solving problems. It may sound frustrating at first to kind of go, oh, what? There's always going to be problems. Like, if I'm going into 2024, are there going to be problems in the year ahead? Yeah, there are going to be problems in the year ahead. But that's okay. Like, you can do hard things. That's another idea. You can do hard things, like, versus like, they're not expecting the hard things. And when the hard things come, oh my gosh, I'm having triggered. I'm all over the place. Like, there's an emotional maturity that I'm also in the last 2 or 3 years starting to value a lot, which is when people around, when things don't happen the way they want them to, when something's happening there or whatever, versus the trigger that would naturally be there for us, like having an emotional maturity to be able to be more solid, resolved, not soft, like resolved is strong, resilient, but not just thrown all over by the things that are happening around us when they're not happening the way that we want to, which is going to be happening over the course of our whole lives, right? And I know you the same with me, building a team, and that's hard. Building a team is super hard as a leader, and you're dealing with people, and people have different paths, and you're like, hey, this person would be amazing at this thing, and then either they don't step into that like you thought they could, or you see within them, or they chose something different, which is, it's going to happen, right? Because they're doing their thing. But that's hard. That can be hard as a leader when you're like, I know this is going to be the awesome piece to this team to make us be able to do the thing well. And then it's not easy. So cruise control, wanting the easy, we want the straight line up versus, you're seeing, hey, what we think it's going to be, right? Versus the chaos that it is. And then, eventually it kind of gets there if we keep going.
Totally. No, I love that, man. And I love like I love when we start projects here, it's kind of like a huge part of the creativity is in, we have all this planning we've done, we have all this preparation, and then we always just kind of sit down on the eve of the start, and it's just like it's not like if something isn't going to go according to plan, it's like we know it's not going to go according to plan. Like, we know these things we couldn't foresee in our planning are going to happen, but look what we've built together. Look how strong we are. Look how nimble. Look how much of a problem solver mindset we've cultivated, so that then when those things happen, it's like, this is what we trained for. Like, we could do this in our sleep if it was always like 72 blue skies, everyone showed up on time, everything happened right, no planes got delayed. No, it's like, it's because of all those things that you're able to actually like, and if you can make that all part of the creative process, that's really fun. That's my goal right now. Like, I keep trying to take more of those things into the creative process, like we're doing a bigger project, and there's more cooks in the kitchen, and there's more kind of suits involved at a higher level. That's part of the creative process. That's part of the creative process. Like, how can I get everybody on board to see this as something we're making? How can I, another project, there's a limited budget, there's not enough resources. Part of the creative process. Another project, someone drops out last minute, we couldn't foresee that. Another project, it's like, how do I just begin to look at all of it like part of the creative process, instead of like annoyances or problems, or like, because to your point, you said something that was really smart. It's almost like you live your life a lot of us are taught to live our life like, if I can just like hold on, it's all going to become like perfect. Like, it's like there's just this moment out there where it's like the sun's perfectly setting and there's no bugs flying around and my kids are all happy and my bank account's full. Instead of just being like, that's a fiction. Life is always going to be moving in and out in all these different ways. And I'm thinking about this right now a lot with our kids. It's like, right when you figure out one season, it changes. Like, it's always changing. It's always evolving. There is no perfect. And so finding those moments where you're just like, I'm grateful, I'm alive, I'm excited, I'm here in the middle of it, in the middle of all the things. And all those things, that all gets to be part of the creative process. And that's part of why, when I say like, I want to go hug the filmmaker, because when someone makes something great, I always think the creative process was so much bigger than just what I saw on screen or what I heard at that concert or what I saw at that exhibit. Like, I know enough to know all the life
Mm.
stuff that had to be folded into that process to still come out with something so beautiful in the end. So yeah, anyway, all the things you're saying really resonate a lot.
And that also connects to the belief of magic, of what can happen, and an unstoppable sense of work. So I think these are your words. The belief of magic, of what can happen, with gratitude, with being ready for the hard, with an unstoppable sense of work, I think is what you called it. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like, how do you see those factors? What are they, and how do they come together?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think like I feel like what I love about what we get to do is like, it is this intersection of like creativity, collaboration. Like filmmaking is a very unique art form because it's not like writing a novel. It's not like doing a painting. It takes tons and tons of people. And so it's creative at one place, it's collaborative in another place. And then what I mentioned earlier, it's also just really, really difficult. You have all these constant pressures, financial pressure. It's a really expensive thing to do. It requires moving a lot of people around. It requires all these things. So you're never just like sitting on a back porch doing a watercolor. It's a heightened, pressurized environment, and a lot of success in my role has to do with what you're mentioning earlier of like, can I be calm and can I be actually functioning at my best when it is the most chaotic, when there are the most things thrown at me,
Mm.
when the most things change, when we're calling the most audibles? Can I be a person who isn't just able to white knuckle through it, but can I actually find a way to have those forces like heighten my clarity and my sense of like, what it is I'm doing? And a lot of that, to your last question, is just the part of the equation that it is ruthlessly difficult work, and it takes an enormous amount of effort. I was just reading, Ridley Scott just made the new Napoleon movie, and he's 84 years
Mm.
old. And I think he's got like 4 films coming out in the next 2 years. And I was just reading this interview with this longtime producing partner, and he's like, a lot of people make a lot to do about Ridley's artistic, skill. And he's like, it's really admirable and cool, but he's like, it's just the work ethic. It's just the fact that the guy has tapped into something that he loves, that he's good at, that he's put a lot of, he's done it for decades now. And he's just like ferociously interested in doing the work. And it just kind of goes back to that thing we were talking about earlier, Greg. It's like when you see the work as not something to be skipped or avoided or passed off or stepped around or uh, even just bearable to get through. But when you start to see the work as the part that is where all the life is, and the outcomes are actually not as fun as you thought, that it's the craft right in the middle that
Mm.
is really where the
Mm.
joy is. That's so powerful. And that's,
Mm.
I'll never
Mm.
forget the first film that we had that like was kind of successful and in some traditional ways. I'll never forget that moment of like being in these very public places and doing these things and feeling very sad. And the sadness was like, I missed making it. Like I honestly couldn't wait to just get back to making the next one. Like that clarity for me of like, again, the thing I love about this is the craft. The thing I love about this is that like that stuff that takes tons and tons and tons and tons of hours. Like if you can position your life in a way where you are not trying to work around the work, but the work becomes the creative process. It becomes the problem solving you're mentioning,
Mm.
the collaboration that like that's where the joy, like you're talking about, the stuff you're designing for your clients, the stuff you're building with your team, the culture you're making there in your office. Like if that's not an annoyance to you, if that's actually like something that's giving joy, like that should be generating, not like sucking out of you. And there, there's issues around, you could be overtaxed, you could need to, all those things are real, but like, man, I just want that for everyone in the world. I want for everyone in the world to not, because it's not, and I love you to comment on this. It's not this search for a utopian vocation that's always fun all the time. Like again, to be clear, like I have a lot of hard days. I have a lot of like deeply challenging days, like to put it charitably. But I love what I'm doing at its core and its essence so much And I constantly am trying to reframe even those challenging days into being part of the creative process as much as the writing or as much as the filmmaking itself. And that's really powerful because again, it's not like I'm just sitting here expecting or waiting or holding out joy till I get to this place where every one of my days is
Mm,
perfect. It's more
mm,
like it's just going to be a wild ride, but man, it's a good one, you know? It's a good one.
yeah.
And also
It
like
was,
what else would we do? Like we're going to die soon. I mean, we're only here. It's such a fun thing to be able to give yourself to something that's bigger than your life and to love it, you know, not to fake love it, not to love the premiere days, not to love the press days, like to love the sweatpants 2 a.m. edit suite days. That's when you know you're onto something in whatever field.
that's the work. Loving the work, I think, is versus the outcome. Learning that it is a journey, that it is the day to day. It is how you get the reps. In Kirby Smart for Georgia football talks about, and Nick Saviano in tennis talks about the practice is the thing. Then the games are fun, but like the practice is the work. Like bring your best to that. Bring it. And this guy wrote a book, Bounce, Matthew Syed, and I kind of see it. This is like the unofficial next book following Outliers and sequel. And he talked about the intensity of what we do. So it's not just doing the 10,000 hours, because again, you can drive for 10,000 hours, 30,000 hours, 50,000 hours and still be a really bad driver. But the intensity, the figuring out the thing, the evaluation, the feedback, the looking to grow, looking to improve, you bring that to your work, and then that becomes a part of your day to day, and super powerful. And then also when you talk about the work of the 80-year-old, it's Ridley Scott. I mean, Russ Crossan, it won't tell his age, but you know, he's been doing this since we started in 1980. And I look at him, and it's part of our philosophy is America's version is hurry up and quit a lot of time. Like, what do you do with work? Oh, well, you try to hurry up and get on the other side of the work. You try to hurry up and get to the things that you really want to do. And what has been so helpful, because that has financial implications. If I go, you know what, I'm actually going to work to 70 or 75. Some people go, oh, that sounds horrible. Well, it depends on what you're doing. But if I see it as being a sustainable work, incorporating things that I'm getting better at, creating momentum, learning how to grow and do it better, and in the middle of that, learning my skills and my interests and how I can do those more with my unique ability over time, then why not? And I see Russ doing, he's going out and speaking, he's investing in our people, and you know, we call him our chief mission officer. I'm like, man, that sounds, for a lot of places, I think that would be like a no-name title. Like, what do they do? But he's fully engaged. And I'm like, yeah, like, why not? You know, and then there's no retirement. There's just me being engaged with the gifts and the callings that I feel like God has put within me. And then the iteration of that may change over time. And there might be a point in time where I don't need any income, but I'm also not waiting to travel with my family or do things till I'm, you know, on the other side of the thing either. So it's like, how do I incorporate that into the rhythms? And so how has the rhythm part of what you do changed over time in the waves and the frequency, and how you incorporate that with family and marriage, and how's that look for you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I love how you just said all that, by the way, especially the last part of not waiting, not like putting joy like on a shelf, you know, that's gonna be unpacked later, like opening that
Yeah.
bottle tonight, you know, like that's cool. I yeah, I married a high school sweetheart, and we got married very, very young, and we had kids really young. We have 4 kids, and we sort of have grown up together, both Emily and I, and in a sense our kids with us too, because we really were young. And I think we've always just kind of had them a part of this process. It's like some of my most precious memories from these films are, they're sort of like seasons of our life, you know, like when I look at those posters in the hallway, I see you know, we've taken our kids on location to live on set. Like if we're going to be shooting like a scripted feature for a long period of time, we'll all go live there together. I've taken, you know, individual kids on different trips, you know, on the documentary side. We've gone to premiere stuff together. We've traveled for that. It's just been a lot of our life, and it's really been, it's been beautiful and very powerful. It's hard to like separate that out from my life, because it's like my whole life. Like it's always been my life too. Because I started a family so young. Like I was building was building a career at the same time I was building a family, and I've never seen them in opposition. I almost got lucky because we, again, didn't know what we didn't know. I think we kind of built a family before we knew. I see some people later on that are like, they're making pros and cons lists about having kids and all that stuff. And I'm like, man, that sounds so challenging because I just didn't know, you know? And it's always changing. You know, Emily has produced some films with me. And then we've also had seasons where it's more challenging and there's more, you know, our kids are requiring more. And so we're a little bit in different areas. I can already see, you know, our kids are in middle school and high school now. I can already see a point 10 years from now that's just going to be vastly different. I think she will be much more heavily involved, like on a day-to-day level. And even that's really framing, even that's really helpful in that waves come in sets. It's like right now we are in a busy time because, you know, middle school, high school, they're playing sports, they're doing stuff. And I'm traveling, we're doing a lot of stuff. So yeah, some of it is just that. It's just kind of like looking at every project as it comes, trying to figure out every season. And again, not chasing that perfect balance, but chasing that sense of rhythm. And some of that rhythm is a little bit more full on, and then we pull back a little bit engaged all the way, and then we kind of retreat. And a big part of that retreat is going to be coming around the holidays, which feels cool. So I think I'm really grateful that Emily has been able to learn how to do that with me. I think we've kind of learned that together, of just sort of throwing out the playbook and saying like, what works for us? You know, what does our family need right now? And honestly, even like throwing out some traditional, you know, like wisdom around like long-term planning, to be like, our life's a little different. And like these projects, these years take a lot, and we're going to put a premium on our family being together. We're going to put a premium on experiencing these really big moments together. I'm really grateful for that, you know. And again, I'm like right in the middle of it. So like, there's probably so much I'm doing wrong, and there's probably so much that I'll say differently in 10 years, but I love it, man. I love it. I love raising kids, and they're at that point now where they're like becoming our friends, and it's just powerful. It's powerful right now.
Well, it's another one of those areas where we're not perfect, and we see that showing up, and we see the failures, right? We see the mistakes, and then you'll look back in 5 years and you'll see the mistakes in 10 years, and you'd be like, I love this quote that's kind of like, what our kids don't understand is that we're trying to figure it out too. Like we all haven't figured it out. We have no idea, you know, and you kind of hopefully get better with each child because you're making mistakes. The first one, you've never done this before. Talk about reps. You've never done this before. Pretty important thing in your life that you've never had a rep on. You know what I mean? It's like, that should be pretty scary in a sense, but it's kind of interesting. I think one of the ideas that you just spoke to that I think is so important as we think about what is success, when we think about all the different aspects of life in balance. You and I talked about other words that we like to use. I really love the word harmony more than balance. I don't think let's say there's 4 key categories of our life or whatever we would design. I don't think it's like 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%, right? It's not, you were talking about it's not, you're going 8 to 5 every day, right? And then, but it's more this idea of harmony. And I think what you spoke to, something that I think is super important, is finding areas where they can integrate. Okay, you're doing something with Emily. Okay, this project, you're able to bring your kids. You're not always able to do that. So it's not perfect. It's stumbling. It's messy. It's, you know, figuring it out. It doesn't work this time. You know, oh, this didn't go how we thought. But you're looking for areas where you can overlap areas of your life to where it's more and more integrated, because it's impossible, I think, very hard to keep everything completely different buckets and then try to juggle. Whereas, man, the more you're able to integrate over time, and usually it's one of those over time things, right? Maybe more and more over time, you're able to do that. I don't know if that resonates with you or not.
Yeah, no, it does. It resonates a lot. And as does the like imperfection of it. And I don't know, but it also makes me think, as you're talking about, just that thought of like the creativity of my life isn't going to just be the things that I make. It's going to be like my life, like my whole life is a creative act. You know, the way we're building our family, and the way it's all creative. Like, again, you know, and again, it goes back to that thing of like, not in spite of the challenges, but because of the challenges. Like, it's creative because there are imperfections and there are things that we have to figure out on the fly. It's really fun, man. It's funny. Like I get so head down, and like, there's just certain moments. I think the holidays kind of bring it up for me, where you're just able to kind of look back over your shoulder like everything in front of you feels like you're like falling down the stairs. A friend of mine said like falling down the stairs with rollerblades on. But it's really powerful to kind of look back over your shoulder and just to realize how special your life is and how grateful you are in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of like, and we're in the midst of it right now, but like it's cool to just realize like, I don't know. I think a lot of us were taught that life was something it's just totally not. And a lot of it was about, to your point, like waiting it out, holding on till retirement. A lot of work was sacrifice, and it was like drudgery, and it was a grind, and then on the other side, it was like it was perfection, and it was always one. And just to kind of,
Mm.
I don't know, to get comfortable with this idea that life is challenging, and it's beautiful, and it's heartbreaking, and it's joy filled, and it's all of those things all the time at once. Like it's a cool thing. It really is cool.
And it's for me, it's also thinking, I love this view of whatever is true should be true throughout the world and should also be true throughout history. So if you think about work, I think sometimes we're bringing in a view of what we think it should be in America, in Western, society, with honestly a lot of wealth. Not everybody's wealthy. A lot of people in different situations, but there's a lot more wealth here in our country, a lot more options that come along with that. And options come Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We're kind of self-actualization in a lot of ways, and we don't realize it as a grateful, wow, we do have options. Wow, this is, I mean, if you think throughout the world, that's probably not the case. If you think throughout history, that's probably not the case. So then the question I would have is, okay, well, are they not able to have meaningful work because they don't have the choices that we have? Or were they not able to have meaningful work throughout history? Like if they're third generation rice farmer over in Asia, are they not able to have the same meaningful work that we're able to have because they don't have the ultimate choice? And I'm like, no, I think there's something more raw about work being good and work being for providing for our family. And if I need to go dig a ditch to put food on the table for my family, then that is a good thing. And that is a worthy thing. It may not be there may be other things I'm interested in, but I think work can still be meaningful and valuable. Something I want to ask you about is, I think this is a big contrast, and is you're a creative, right? And you started, hey, I want to make film. I want to do this creative act in the highest form, if you will, in our society, as people would think about it. And so I've worked with some business owners, some nonprofits, and the number of creatives on their financial engine and understanding the finances. So on one hand, many of them are pursuing a path away from finances. I'm not good at numbers. I don't want anything. I want to do the film. I want to put on, and yet I think I'd love to hear you speak to, like, okay, I actually learned that understanding the numbers, understanding the financial engine for a film, understanding a budget and how to navigate that, as unsexy as that may be, how important that's been in your growth and you're being successful in what you're doing, that they're actually, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they're probably more integrated than a lot of people think.
Yeah, super integrated. I mean, I will caveat it with, there is a real limit to my business expertise. Like when I talk to guys like you, I feel very small in that category, but I view it as deeply creative. I do. I mean, I think I find a budget for a project in particular to be like near the heart and center of the creative core of the project, because the budget reflects how we're going to allocate resources and time, and that is everything. When you're making a film, you don't have enough resources and you don't have enough time. So choosing the budget reflects who the team's going to be. The budget reflects what kind of pace you're going to work at. The budget reflects how you're anticipating for unanticipated things to happen. Like, I find that really deeply, deeply creative. I also have partnered with people and brought people onto our team who are far better at that than I am. My brother is my producing partner and has been for several years, and he's way smarter in that way. His brain works like he could run circles around me. So we collaborate on it deeply, but then I also do it with the humility that I'm not, I think for me, like I'm an inventor, I'm a creator, I'm a starter, I'm a believer when something is really early on. And so I put a lot of energy into it. So some of what I've learned over time has been about, I've always loved, being a part of the budget stuff and not seeing that as separate. But I think to your point, like I've I've also been really careful in recent years more than ever to put people around me who are more critical, who are more their brain just works different than me. My brain is typically going to be like, what if it all goes right? Like, how worthwhile is this endeavor? Like, what if it all goes right? And to have people that are like, yeah, but also, how are we setting up
Mm,
for if it doesn't, or if this doesn't happen, or if
mm,
that doesn't happen, what are the different contingencies? And yeah, I mean, dude, being really honest, like over the years, I think that's the only reason that we've been able to stay in the game. I mean, I've seen a lot of talented, creative people who have
mm,
neglected the business portion of it to their peril. And I always kind of have to look at our years and I have to look at our time and try to figure out it's a dance. It's a really creative dance, and it's a combination of different projects and different things. When we choose to go all in on something, calculating that risk. When we choose to do multiple things, what does that mean? So yeah, it's no joke. Like I really do think that there are just countless people in my industry that aren't able to get to be doing that work at that level in their 80s because of the financial, truly, on a lot of different
yeah, well,
levels.
you think about it, it's like I see businesses try to get started, spend money, and kind of the rule of thumb is revenue is going to take longer than you think, and expenses are going to be more than you think, and sooner. Right? Like, I know that's not an encouraging thought, but it helps you prepare well for
Yeah.
reality. And I'm sure you've seen that. I mean, I can't imagine the number of projects over and over and over again, and you've gotten a ton of reps of seeing money just go, and so then you've adjusted, and I'm sure things that you've done along the way, have shifted because of that. And it's like somebody building a house. I mean, it's going to be 25% over if they manage it really, really well. Like that's if they do really well. Could easily be 50 to 75% more. And so you kind of think about your world or business world, man, understanding that and having somebody like your brother that you don't have to be the expert. I kind of liken it to dashboard on a car. I'm not a mechanic, but I know how much oil. I know if the oil light's on. I know how fast I'm going. I know what the gas gauge is telling me, right? Or my tire's low. So I know where to go get help, and I know the factors that I need to be paying the most attention to. And I kind of, let's say, for business leaders, nonprofit leaders, creatives, whatever, like that's what you need to know. And then you need to know the mechanic, right? Or you need to know the bookkeeper. You need to know the CPA that's going to be able to help you get there. On the personal finance side, anything that you guys have learned, you and Emily, as you've kind of been running a house that have been helpful to you and maybe encouraging to other people in terms of how you kind of learned how to navigate that well? And I'm sure failures along the way there too, but what's helped you there?
Yeah, man, it's hard. I don't know that I'm like a success story on this side. I mean, we have a very different setup because we sort of started out and it was like we wanted to be making the best work of our life in our 80s. We wanted to be friends with our kids when they were grown, and we wanted to have cultivated this family like team of people that we'd collaborated with for decades. That was our kind of like that's where we want to go. And reversing from that, what that's meant is we have just sort of invested everything as we've gone back into the work. Like this is a very strange industry I'm in. It's not like if you're a lawyer or a doctor or the
Mm,
path is very uneven, and there's been a sense in which it's almost like we've not like cashed out on anything. We've always like it's always been like putting it back into the next thing. It's always been kind of this effort of like, so if I'm making a wager, it's a wager on us, and it's a wager on the long term. It's a wager on like I
mm,
feel like I am able to create a life that takes care of our kids and is we're not just like not living, but we have really intentionally fought hard to not take certain steps in our life and not go to different levels. I mean, we live in a way that's like uh very frugal, and this city that I live in, like it would kind of be horrifying to some people, like what neighborhood we live in and how we live and some of those things. And in other ways, we're very, very fortunate. I don't want to paint a picture like we're not very fortunate,
yeah,
but
yeah,
there has been a constant calculation of like, let's stay nimble enough. Let's keep the overhead low enough that we keep more options open. Let's not like bog the whole thing down where we need like all these clients and doing this work we don't. It's like let's stay like a battleship that
yeah.
can just keep maneuvering through. And the only thing I feel successful in, because there isn't any big, like financial, like you wouldn't look at it and be like, this is a planner's dream. But what I really do feel strong about is that she and I have navigated that together every step of the way. And I think that's been what's made it work. Like we have been very
Mm.
aligned on what we want in our life, what success looks like in our life, and the role that money was going to play in that. Outside of that, I still have a lot to learn. I mean, I still have like so much to learn.
Yeah.
And that's why I like talking to guys like you, frankly, because there is a lot about it that I'm sure I could be thinking much more longer term and doing all kinds of wise stuff. But it's really been about stay nimble, stay together, and keep investing in the work so that we can keep showing up and doing it, trusting we're getting better, trusting there's a longer term commitment that we're making.
I love the long-term idea that you and Emily have talked about with partnership, being specific, writing on things. You've kind of created these pictures. We want to be friends when they're kids, when they're gone. Boom, that's a visual. I can kind of start to see what that may look like. I want us to be doing great work when we're 80. Okay, man, that's out there together. It's direction. We've got a direction. It's kind of like the horizon, that we're aiming towards, right? And we kind of know where we're going. And we may navigate different things along the way, but we kind of know where we're going to keep aiming at. So that's super beautiful. I think that's really powerful in a relationship to be able to have that partnership, that team mentality that you guys are talking about. And shifting a little bit here, just the last few minutes, I'll just shift with a really big question. No big deal on this one. But when you think about life for yourself, like what is success for you? Like what is meaning and ultimate success for you in life as you think about it?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a sense in which there's some kind of intersection between being in a place where I feel completely alive and that's like joy and meaning and all kinds of stuff wrapped up together. I don't even have the right word for that, but building my life in that place, not stopping over as a tourist there, building my life in that place and having that intersect with stuff that I actually believe in as a way of like offering something that's useful or helpful in the world. And I say that just because I think I've seen people be on either end of that spectrum. Either there's this like duty obligation, like the world's really broken. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of unnecessary suffering. And I'm going to just like give and give and give and give. And there's a lot to that. And then I've seen other people that are like, I'm just going to chase after joy. I'm just going to chase after like why it is I was put on this planet for a few years. And there can be something very self-indulgent about that. And art in particular can run its own very self-indulgent course if it's divorced from something that's of service. So I think finding a way to put both of those things together to say, like, I love when we're able to make something and it's able to do something in the world that's useful or helpful, or I get to hear from someone that, it made a real impact in their life. And I love hearing that because it also impacted my life. Like I was richer for making it also. Like it wasn't like I sacrificed something to make something that was helpful. They went hand in hand. And again, that doesn't mean like everything I do has this like charitable focus, right? But everything I'm doing from a storytelling perspective is I'm looking for ways to ultimately I want to tell stories that inspire hope-filled action. Ultimately, I'm really out. There's an enemy on the horizon for me. It's apathy and it's despair. So I'm really interested in getting people more engaged. And that can be in a lot of different contexts and a lot of different ways. But the path to get there, what's so cool about it for me is like, it's not about like, I'm not lessening so that I can give something. I want to carve out this world where I'm operating at my most, like I'm facing into the fear. I'm doing the hardest thing every time. I'm reaching for what I don't even know if I can pull off. I'm all of those exhilarating, intoxicating, creative pursuits are also like right there with, I mean, at the end of the day, I really want to, I want to create stuff that leaves a mark. I want to move people. I want to excite people. I want to remind people like the best art to me, like, when I see an amazing movie, I saw an amazing movie a couple nights ago and I walked out and I was like, I just remembered in that experience how crazy cool it is to be a human being alive. Like I had forgotten I had forgotten, and it woke me up again. Like, so yeah, if I can be a part of that, that's my goal. That's my goal. And I think that's like, as
Well,
imperfect as that is, that's where I'm trying to get to.
I love it. I love it. So if you think about changing gears as we close out, just first of all, thanks for joining in. I kind of feel like roles are reversed a little bit. I think you've interviewed me a few times over the years for some
I
different
have. It's
projects
true.
you're
Yeah, it's
working
true.
on.
It's
I was
true.
like, man, I feel under pressure from the expert interviewer, Andrew Morgan. Man, you killed it. You were so good, and I appreciate your heart. I appreciate your integrity. We've seen each other through a lot of different things. I'm not all the time, but here and there in some really meaningful ways through the years. So I appreciate that about you. I appreciate your authenticity and how you're trying to be real to what you feel called to do, the roles that are in your life and how you're dedicated to those, but you're also thinking very long term about it. You're thinking about generosity and impact. You're thinking about family. You're thinking about, yeah, hey, how can we make a difference? How can we move people through the work that we're doing? And you're an inspiration to me. I mean, I love every conversation. I'm like, man, let's go for another 4 hours. Like I'm Lex Friedman or whatever his name is. He's like, hey, long form, man. Let's keep rocking. We do 3.5 hours with, Jared Kushner or Elon Musk or something. I'm ready to go. I appreciate the inspiration that you are, but also like more than that, like just dedicated to the work of living, dedicated to the work of those roles, dedicated to the hard things and sharing time, with me and others today. And whoever sees this, I think is going to be really blessed by it.
Thanks, man. I've really enjoyed it, and I've learned so much from you over the years. It's ridiculous. So it's humbling to be on this side of the equation, and I love that you're doing this. I really do. I think you have a cool perspective that's very very nuanced and very needed, and it's fun to be a little part of that.
So is there anything recently that you've kind of seen or experienced, podcast, YouTube, book, movie, anything that's kind of been recent or not even recent, maybe longer term, that's just really been impactful for you that would be good for other people to know about?
And I'm so bad at these things. I feel like I fall in love with stuff every single week.
Yeah.
This is like, I know a lot of folks know this one, but I just was reading a new interview with him, and I picked The War of Art back up for the first time in a long time, and I was kind of going back through that.
Pressfield,
and it's so
Steven Pressfield, right?
Yeah, Steven Pressfield. It's so funny because I read that when I was really
Yeah,
young, and it
yeah,
was like
yeah,
it like lit a fire in me, and
yeah.
it was so funny to read it 15 years later after been
Mm.
through more, and it hit me in very different ways, and I don't know, it felt like a more of a cathartic read. So yeah, if anyone hasn't read
Mm.
The War of Art, then read that, and definitely like not just anyone who's involved in something they would call quote unquote art. I think one of the great things about him and that message is that like truly every single thing we do vocationally and otherwise is a creative act. And I don't know, it had a cool way of like reminding me and reframing that whole thing again, which honestly put a lot of that in my mind for this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's a really good book. It's about the dedication to the craft in a sense, in being a professional versus an amateur. I believe, if I'm remembering some of that, what a professional does versus what an amateur does, and it's really really good work. How can people stay involved? What are a couple of the films that they maybe can check out that you've already done, and a couple of things that they can do just to kind of follow along with what you're up to?
Yeah, you can check out our team. Untold.la has our work, and you can see a bunch of stuff there. We've done a handful of documentaries, handful of scripted features. They're all there. I'm like Andrew_Morgan on Instagram, which I'm supposed to be using more. I haven't been as great on it. And then we've got a new series that we're going to be releasing this spring on PBS here in the States, called A Brief History of the Future, that I'm really, really, really excited. It's a 6-part series that we just shot all over the world this year, and it's kind of looking at some of the major challenges facing humanity, but looking through the lens of not just what are the problems that we're trying to avoid, but really framing like what's the future we actually want to see unfold. What's the goal we are aiming for? What is possible? Not just, I've spent a lot of years making things about, problems, which can be really useful, but I hit a level of like fatigue, feeling our collective fatigue of like, We just we get
Yeah.
shown a lot of what's wrong in the world.
Yeah.
So we went out
Yeah.
this year looking for some of the people who were pioneering new ways of thinking, new ways of problem solving, new ways of, and it was really, really moving. So anyway, that'll be coming out. You can look for that. A Brief History of the Future will be coming out this spring on PBS.
Love it. Love it. Andrew, I'm grateful for you. Thanks again for the time today. And we'll be paying attention to all the things that you're up to. Talk to you very soon.
Thanks, man. Take care.